Well, hello, and welcome to Hey Preach, where we answer questions that are sent in to me. So, the question we're taking a look at right now is how can we be sure the Bible has in it what was originally written? Hasn't it been changed over the years and through translation? And this is a great question, and actually, it's probably more than one question, but we'll get through as much as we can and go from there. So as far as what was originally written, the Bible is the most accurately transmitted book from the ancient world. There's no other ancient book that has as many as early or more accurately copied manuscripts. Now, I'm sure you're going, how can that be? I've heard myself the stories abound that the church leaders censored documents and about us having no idea what was originally written, etc. And so I'm going to try to hit some of that, and may end up having to make more than one video regarding this. So we'll see. Yeah, the Bible was written roughly some 2,000 years ago. But what has been passed down can be trusted as to what was originally written. See, let me ask a rhetorical question. What are the tests that are applied to any piece of historical literature to verify if it's accurate or reliable? Because if we're going to question the historical reliability of the Bible, then it needs to be examined in the same ways as other historical documents. So there are three things that are usually used when doing such scrutiny: looking at internal evidence, external evidence, and of course, bibliographical evidence. And the question that's asked is really focusing on the bibliographical texts. In other words, since we don't have the originals, how reliable are the copies? Well, to determine this, we being people that do this, not me personally, compare various copies to one another and look at how much time is between the original and the copies. And so, taking a look at just the New Testament, for example, and its reliability, it's been very well established because the number, date, and accuracy of the manuscripts that allow to be the entire New Testament to be reconstructed of the original text has more precision than any other ancient text. Uh, Literally, the amount of New Testament manuscripts is overwhelming. There's some 5,700 Greek manuscripts. There are over 10,000 copies of the Latin Vulgate and about 9,300 copies of different versions, Coptic and Sumerian, etc. In addition to that, there's 24,000 manuscript copies of portions of the New Testament in existence that can and has been compared to each other. So then, how do those compare to other historical books? Is that a lot? Is that not a lot? Well, most historical books that we believe are accurate, we only have 7 to 10 manuscripts. The historical book that comes the closest is Homer's Iliad, which has 643 manuscripts. So the New Testament is simply the best textually supported book from the ancient world. Now, in regard to how close is it in its time? Here I am smacking the microphone. Sorry. How close is this in to the originals? Well, the earliest undisputed New Testament manuscript is called the John Rylands Papyrus, and it was dated around AD 117 and 138. Whole books are available from around the year 200, and most of the New Testament, including all of the Gospels, is available in dating to about 250. Now, I know, because it's what I first thought when I first started studying this, is that's a pretty big gap. Well, that's because we're not used to dealing with historical literature, and we don't realize the huge gaps that generally exist in this. For example, it's accepted that we have accurate text of the 7 plays by Sophocles. There exists only 193 copies to check, and the copies were written 1,400 years after the poet's death. But hey, don't take my word for it. A British manuscript scholar, Sir Frederick Kenyon, he said that the interval between the dates of the original and the copies, earliest extant evidence, becomes so small as to be in fact negligible, and the last foundation for any doubt that the scriptures have come down to us substantially as they were written has now been removed. Thus both the authenticity and the general integrity of the books of the New Testament may be regarded as firmly established. No other ancient book has as small of a time gap between composition and the earliest manuscript copies as the New Testament. You know, the Iliad was written somewhere around the 13th century, when it was way before the events are supposed to take place, at least the writing of that story. Now, how do the copies compare to each other? Again, using the Iliad as comparison. In the New Testament, there's 40 lines, or about 400 words, that are in doubt in comparison to 764 lines of the Iliad. And most of the variations are minor word order changes, which, with Greek being an inflection language, does not change the meaning because the variations that occur are minor. As a matter of fact, this is something that comes up with the translation. It's syntax and doesn't really have punctuation in the same way English does. And so a lot of those little dots and tittles that are changes there are not changing anything in the meaning and the context, and as far as that goes. Matter of fact, the scholars Norman Gessler and William Nix stated that the New Testament has not only survived in more manuscripts than any other book from antiquity, but has also survived in a purer form than any other great book, a form that is 99.5% pure. It's reliable to what was originally written as it's been passed down. And so, briefly looking at the internal evidence, though we don't have the originals, the letters of Paul and John were being circulated while eyewitnesses were alive who could refute if it was not correct. And believe me, during that time when they were wanting to disprove what was being referred to as the way, which is what they called Christianity, that it was in Antioch when the word Christians was first used. They didn't run around calling themselves Christians. They understood themselves as to be fulfilling the Jewish prophecies. And so there were people who would have easily stood up and said, no, that's not what happened. And when you look at the letters of Paul and John and Peter that were being circulated at this time, they often use phrases such as, you saw for yourselves, we have heard, you know that it was stated. And, easily someone could have said, nope, that's not what happened there. And so the comparison accounts of the Gospels even back each other up. Not just the letters. And so what I mean by that is, you got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are called the Gospels, and Matthew, Mark, and Luke are the synoptic Gospels. They kind of find a different, follow a similar format of how they are set up. And interesting enough, each one of them has a different author's purpose. Mark, I refer to Mark as the let's get down to business. It's the shortest gospel, the first one, the Gospels that were written. And I don't know if he was just trying to get it down to be first to get it out, or, he just didn't have time for a lot of fluff. Matthew kind of comes across as a pastoral type of purpose and the way that his writing. Luke was written by a doctor, and outside of Paul, Luke wrote the majority of the New Testament between the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts, also written by Luke. And then you have John, who's kind of out there on his own little world. He's writing mainly to Greeks, and he's the kind of far more esoteric in the way that he is doing this, because he's leaning into the philosophical ways in which Greek audience thought and did at his time. Yet even in this, when you're looking at the Gospels, their eyewitness accounts back each other up. Now, no, they're not word for word perfect accounts, and they might focus on some different perspectives, but that's literally how eyewitness accounts that are reliable work. As a matter of fact, in court, if eyewitness accounts come and the testimony is just about word for word to the exactness of each other, that's evidence that they actually got together and probably tried to get their story straight, because people focus on things, their perspectives are different, the reasons that they're writing, what I notice might be different than when we're setting. Just take for example, if my wife and I were looking at a beautiful picture, we're going to focus on different things that really stand out to us. And in the same way, and some people like to talk about, well, the Gospels contradict each other. And well, A contradiction means that both it's mutually exclusive. In other words, both things cannot be true at the same time. I cannot have all of the lights on in this room at the same time I have all of the lights off. Can I have lights on and off? Yes. As a matter of fact, I have some lights that are not on at this very moment. Another example is like John and Fred went to the party versus Fred went to the party. That's not a contradiction. Fred went to the party. The first person just didn't mention John went. Maybe they didn't like John. Who knows? And so the comparison of the Gospels, as I said, they back each other up. And in addition, you have external evidence that backs up the stories in Scripture. You have the Jewish historian Josephus as one non-biblical source. He's not a Christian. He was a Jewish historian, and he wrote about a lot of the events that were going on. Not everything. He's not backing up every aspect of the Bible. He was literally writing a history text, and he makes mention of Jesus' crucifixion and other events in the Bible, and it corroborates it. You have the writings of the Bishop of Hierapolis, that's Papias, that's around A.D. 130, who corroborates the words of John. He said, "I was there, I heard this said." Irenaeus, he's a student of Polycarp, around A.D. 180. And many others as you go out there, that evidence outside of the Bible that backs up that these events happen. As a matter of fact, archaeological finds continue to uphold the historical accuracy of the Bible, even often proving that it was correct when previous aspects of it was thought to be incorrect. And so with that, we can trust that what has been passed down is accurate. As far as the canonization, did people pull things out? Did they block what was stuff? I think that deserves its own video where I'm focusing just on the canonization, which, if you don't know, that just means the process in which they decided which books are this is the Bible and this is going to be considered out to the side. And translation issues as well may end up being a separate. We'll see how the canonization goes. I'll hit it next, and it's just to avoid these from going too long so that people actually watch the whole video. That being said, if you have any questions that you would like me to address, please email them to pastorscottketchot@gmail.com. That's pastorscottketchot@gmail.com. If you're watching these, you probably already know how these algorithms work, but please click like and subscribe down there so that you'll get when I post these videos out, and it helps algorithm to do its computer magic out there and people to find the videos. And so with that, be blessed. Have a great day. Remember, God is not mad at you. He is madly in love with you.